Decision Diaries with Lynn and Jamie.
So welcome to Decision Diaries. Today we have a special guest, Linda Leneve, and I like to call her a child talent manager. And it's just such a small world because, of course, she went to college with my husband, and I just wanted you on the podcast to hear about the backstory of this decision and leading up to almost every decision you have been making since you made what I consider to be a big decision. So bring us back to when did all this start? When did this
Well,
happen?
first of all, thank you for having me. And I had the chills just hearing you say that, because sometimes I don't realize what's happening. You know what I mean? You don't realize that you're doing all of this, and you look back and you're like, wow, I've really been doing this. So it all started when maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when we were in New York City a couple times, and they saw these big billboards, and they were really curious, how you get up there. So, and specifically, we were looking at a Calvin Klein underwear commercial, a man, and they just thought it was really cool. So after literally 2 years of them asking off and on, mom, about modeling, because I was shocked. I mean, I didn't have girls, so I just never thought I'd be in this world. They just were really intrigued by that. I think they wanted to be up there, right? Somehow, some way. So I said, you know what, let's just start a modeling class, a local one, and see what you think, how you like it. My older one was more outgoing. My younger one at the time was very shy, and just gets, embarrassed very quickly. So I thought, this might be good growth, personal growth, regardless of how it ends up. So we signed them up, and they did a lot of runway with the big lights and the music and shows with the other children and all the different levels of modeling training.
Now,
And
was there a modeling studio in Jacksonville?
There
is there someone you want to
is.
do a little shout out to
There,
that has
there
helped you?
is. She's sold it now. She's retired, but it was called Sessions Modeling.
Okay,
It's
I'm familiar with them.
under a new owner, and it's a really, really great way to start, because it gives you insights, and they even know about the T-zone now. Okay, because they do etiquette classes, literally, where they bring food and they teach etiquette. They do makeup class, of course, because there's more women in it. But it was good because they use it too. I mean, they get made up every time they're on set. But it was cute when they came home and started talking about the T-zone, at age, whatever it is, like 10 or 9. Yeah. And so, we kept doing that for a while because they enjoyed it. And so
What ages were they?
let's
If you
see.
want to.
Well, Christopher's 14 now. So about 4 years ago, we actually started with jobs. So I would say about 8. Christopher was 8, and Alex was 5.
Wow, that is
Yes.
impressive. 5 is impressive.
Yeah. Yes. And so that's why he was just super, especially when he had to go down the runway with a girl and he had to hold her hand. Oh, he was about to blow a gasket, right?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I mean, just red face, just his fist, just because he was just so embarrassed because it was a girl. But I think, the few times that they had to do, they got through it and they realized everything's okay. No one's saying
Right.
anything about, the two of you or whatever. And honestly, when they came out, especially the first time Christopher came out on the runway, it was amazing. It was a crowd. It was packed. Okay. So, I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, nervous for them. The crowd gasped when they saw Christopher for just coming through, and they didn't do that for all the others. And it was just, he had this presence. And I mean, it gives me chills to even think about it. The whole crowd was like, and
Yeah.
it was like, you started to over time realize that they had something, right? Not only did they enjoy it, but they had something. If you see them in person, people might say, oh, they're not that cute or whatever it may be, but behind the camera, they come alive as well.
Well, my husband being, used to be a professional photographer in his earlier days.
Oh,
And, he photographed, mayors and
wow, I
whatever.
didn't know this.
He will tell you that there are some people that truly come to life. And,
Yeah.
I am definitely not one of them, which is funny because he can never seem to get a good picture of me.
Yeah.
But, it is true. It is true. And of course, I think they're adorable in person
Well,
too.
thank you.
But
Thank
I
you.
also think they're adorable because they're just nice kids. Like
Yeah.
they don't really come across as what I call studio kids. And I do
Right, right.
know some
Yes.
studio kids that are like, look at me,
Of
you know,
course.
I
Yeah.
need your attention right now. Instead, it's just kind of a, you know, I could imagine them being very natural.
Yeah, they really are, and I think that's why also what you're explaining is why they're successful to date, because they are very unfazed by it. They enjoy it. They do something, they forget about it. They don't even talk about it. You know, it's just something they do. It's part of almost like their DNA now. I can't say that from the beginning it was like that because it was really a challenge to get them to do auditions, you know, at home, and we can talk about that. But now they love what it brings, you know, in so
Hmm.
many ways, whether it's tangible or intangible. They feel accomplished. But I will tell you, probably the best thing that Brian and I, as you know, husband and wife, have seen as parents, the teachers have even commented just how they can deal with adults, talk with adults, how they handle themselves with adults, have conversations with it. I mean, and we've had so many parents or teachers have told us, wow, these, I mean, how are these kids doing this? You know, I mean, they're just so, they're comfortable in their skin. So I think that that personal journey and growth just continues, and I think it's these experiences, because otherwise they wouldn't have been thrown in some of these scenarios that, you know, it's like,
Well, you know, for people who don't know out there, I'm going to throw one thing out there, but
sure,
I want to hear the progression
sure, yeah,
of where. But just to give everyone an idea, my husband and I, husband coaches soccer, and we were at Dick's Sporting Goods picking up some soccer balls, and on the end cap was your younger son, I believe, Chris. Right? I think I have the right one.
Alex is the younger one. Yep, Alex
Oh,
is, yep,
Alex, the younger
yep,
one, was on the end cap. And
yes.
and we were both like just almost as proud and as excited that, you know, we saw your son in Dick's Sporting Goods as
Yes.
if we were part of your family. Like we were just, you know, we just kind of took that in as, oh, like we know that child. And then oh, we look up and oh, we know that child. So
Yeah,
so that's part of
crazy.
it. So what was the first one? So you guys did these modeling classes.
Yes, yeah.
You got some, you know, great reaction. You kind of know, right?
Hmm,
It's
hmm.
great that you're not, you know, you're not pushing your kids. They kind of, you know, requested this.
Right.
And then what happened? Then what are you doing?
Right. So I was at a loss because there isn't really a market in Jacksonville. The markets for modeling and, you know, print and commercial, et cetera, are primarily in the bigger cities like Miami, Atlanta, Orlando, Tampa, you know, and then around the United States, LA, New York, of course. And I had paid for this portfolio, these big books of pictures and pictures and pictures. But I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? So I started emailing, literally just looking online, you know, researching talent agents in the different bigger cities, looking at reviews, reading them, and I just started sending out emails. I sent, you know, pictures of their portfolio because I didn't have digital at the time. And what I found out later is you don't need print. Okay, so I had these big books that I took to New York City. I took a trip there and back. Literally, that was my first thing we can talk about. But I did it, you know, because I didn't know any better. Yeah, so I just ended up getting, you know, I sent them emails, and then like within a week I had you know, a phone call asking, have you been signed yet by somebody else, because we'd really like to sign the kids. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, not really understanding what all that meant. So that's where it kind of began, and I started getting, you know, more emails, and then little jobs here and there, taking them, and then they started getting to be a little bit known in the industry, because what I'm learning is there's a circle that, you know, it feels so huge when you begin, but they talk, they know each other, you know, it's not that big, especially for boys.
Yeah, I was kind of interested in that because when you talk about the little ones, what were the little ones? What were the
Oh, the
little
little
jobs?
jobs. Well, so like maybe a $400 job, that is a half a day photo shoot for like a toy, for example.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, you know, we would do that. You know, things like that, just like half a day stuff. I even did an extra a couple times. They did extra work, and they, you know, they weren't even seen on the final commercial, but I did that because I wanted to network and get to know people and have them be seen. So I did a lot of that too. I even went to Atlanta for that, for an extra role for Alex.
So that was Atlanta, and then the toy commercials, where were those, like in
Those were in
Orlando?
actually they were in Gainesville. Yeah,
Really? Oh,
they
okay.
were.
And then the agency that you finally went with, where were they located?
So Florida is the only state in the United States that you can have multiple agents because you
Oh,
don't have to be exclusive, right? I
that's
know.
nice.
Beautiful.
That's
Beautiful.
nice.
So because Florida is that state, we have multiple. We have literally probably 12 to 15 agents right now, primarily Miami, Fort Lauderdale. We have a couple Orlando, a couple in Tampa. We do have one in Atlanta that we're exclusive with because it's Georgia, right? You can't
Mhm.
have, they wanted to like represent us nationally, but I said I'm not comfortable giving up all of the work that I've done in Florida, all of the relationships, so but we were able to work out where they said, okay, well, we'll have this market and you can continue with your Florida market, you know?
That's great. I'm actually, so this is what I'm talking about. These are like the details that a
Yeah.
lot of people that you had to find out on your
On my
own,
own.
all
Yes.
on your own, that no one told you about. But it's interesting to me that Florida is that way
Mhm.
because, we do have an entertainment center in the sense of, obviously we've got the
Absolutely.
Disney, and we have the Universal, and we have
Yeah.
all of those, and it's a right to work state. It kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
And is California, I guess, is exclusive? Because that seems
Oh yeah.
insane.
So we did have a New York agent, and I thought
Mhm.
that was so exciting. It's really what I wanted. You know, but it didn't work out so well because the jobs that they were telling us about were the same jobs that our Miami agents were telling us about. So I really wanted
Oh,
to penetrate New York City.
right.
So after about a year and something, we just said, and we went to some classes in New York City, some acting classes and etc. So we did some really good workshops and we learned a lot. It helped us really navigate what we wanted to do and not wanted to do. For example, we were not really interested in theater, but we want to
Oh,
stick
really?
with print and commercial and TV.
Okay.
So it was a great learning, but we just said, you know what, we're going to part ways, and everything was fine. Why did I tell you about New York? See, now I can't even remember what I was telling you about in New
Well,
York.
you mentioned an agent
Oh,
in New York, and then the
yes.
other thing, that I have seen, because we're talking about having your child discovered. And one of the other things that I saw on some documentary a long time ago, when my kids were actually into theater, when they were earlier in their years at Assumption, they were very into theater.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought about doing the same thing, is we watched, there's some hotel that, like, I think Zac Efron or some of all these children go to this hotel in California, and that's where they stay there for about a month, and they just go on auditions all day for
Oh,
sitcoms and stuff like that.
I'm
And
learning something.
yeah, and we had learned this on this documentary or something series like that. It was really
Mhm.
interesting. They'd followed a couple of children, and that's kind of when we made the opposite decision, that we weren't at all in, that
Okay,
we would
I understand.
do that. We just weren't there. I didn't think they were there. They were, starting to get
Mhm.
into sports and all of that. And so it was just kind of like, let's just be in the school plays. So New York, you do those workshops, you decide no theater. And is that Broadway theater, or are your kids thinking no acting,
Yeah,
like
just
movies?
just theater, like any kind
Oh,
of
okay.
on stage, plays and things like that. What they like, television, commercial things, movies, things like that. But I
Okay.
remember why I said that about New York is because we went during that weekend of the workshop, like 4 days actually. There was a California agent who is a manager. So you have your agents and a manager. A manager basically takes you on and grooms you. So it's not just jobs. They, have the relationships, the network, etc. And she wanted to move into the manager role and have LA be our agent. But again, it was exclusive. And so I
Mm.
said, we thought about it and I said, thank you, but that's not for us. We're really enjoying ourselves here. They're very well rounded and playing sports, heavily involved in sports actually. And yeah, so we just said, no thanks. So we decided not to do that and keep it
So
local.
many decisions. I mean,
Oh, so
and
many.
you just have to make them, live with them, move forward. And so then you did some some toy shoots. You mentioned you did some extra. What was that one where you were like, oh my gosh, adorable?
Oh, I think the Ponte Vedra Inn and Lodge, it was the hotel,
Hmm.
vacation resort. That one was for Alex, I will say, the aha moment, like, wow, like, and it was just amazing, beautiful, fun, meeting people at the beach. That didn't hurt.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Local.
yeah, he had to get there. We had to be up at 4 a.m. that morning. And he was young, he started years ago. So, and he did it. He's not a morning person, but he was excited. He was up, ready to go. And I'm like, wow, and it was just so much fun. And for Christopher, we did Honda boating. And that was in Atlanta. And for him, it was just, it was a boating. It was just right up his alley. And, again, we're on the water, we're in a boat, we're fishing, we're just swimming, just having a blast. And every time we've done a job, they compliment the kids saying that they've gotten done earlier than expected, because they never expect kids to be able to be, like they are, like professional, listen, and, it's just harder with kids. And
Right.
so that was just another aspect that we're like, wow, we hear the same feedback every time and they're thrilled. So that's why also sometimes we've gotten called back, again and again, like Dick's Sporting Goods, fifth time. He's shooting again on December 11th. The first,
Wow.
yeah, I know. The second time we were just like, thank you so much, because we're like, oh my gosh, Dick's Sporting Goods, like this is crazy, and I still pinch myself, like you're in Dick's Sporting Goods. And they said, well, he was unforgettable. I'll never forget that. And I'm like, unforgettable? What?
Yeah.
Unforgettable. And I know a lot of it's personality. The personality really helps, because they don't want you, like, if they ask you a question, they don't want a one-word answer. Yes, fine. They want to see you engage with them. Like, I live in Jacksonville.
Well, I think as children talk about things that interest them, their eyes light up. I mean, just in general, I think most people, when they're talking about something that interests them, their face lights up, they loosen up. It just comes across, their smiles come across so genuine.
Genuine, yeah.
When my older son talks about jujitsu, and he just did a photo shoot for Roll Bliss jiu-jitsu
Nice.
clothing company. And
Ooh,
when I look at that picture of him, he's
yeah.
he's in jiu-jitsu gear. He's in
Yes.
his zone.
Element.
If
Yeah.
you stuck him in a lacrosse outfit, you would see you would kind of see him go, "Oh, how do I hold this lacrosse stick?
Right.
Like I don't know what is this? I don't
Right.
know what I'm
Yeah.
doing
Just kind
with
of in
this."
their element.
So
Sure.
so, I mean, and this is a positive podcast. So if you don't want to say anything, that's fine. But I have met them. I will tell you, I have met, like I said,
Uh-huh.
stage children and stage parents.
Mm-hmm.
And have you had
Mm-hmm.
anybody
Mm-hmm.
try to almost like sabotage your children? Because I actually
Mm.
have heard stories of these things occurring. Were there
Yes.
any children that your children were kind of like, hey, I tried to talk to them and I just wasn't getting anything back?
Yeah, so I have two scenarios. That one is a child on set that I can tell you about, and the other one is actually an agent. No names,
Oh,
but my oldest had an auditioned for a music video. His name is escaping me right now, but you would know him. Florida Georgia Line group. They were doing a music video, and he auditioned, and they called, and he's like, "Oh, we love you. We want you, etc. Do you mind if we color your hair?" And of course he's like, no, because we're, like, heck no, we can change it back, before school. And
right.
because we go to a private school. So,
Catholic
and
school. Catholic
a
school. These
Catholic
boys go to
school, that's
Catholic school.
right. They
They're not
do.
going to
They
be having
do.
piercings and face tattoos.
Absolutely. And they have to have their hair groomed a certain way, and, lengthwise. And so anyway, long story short, we were so excited, and they said, okay, she said, okay, I'm going to call you in a couple of days. Da, da, da. She called me back, and she said, you know what? We're looking at one other kid. And I said, okay, no problem. But I find out that it was one of our agent's son. So they kind of came
Oh.
in and swooped it away, even though he wasn't the number one pick. So I was like, oh, that's so interesting, and I'm like, okay, I see. It's going to happen.
That, absolutely that happens. And, you talk about going to New York, and I was up in New York with my mom, and we were in Times Square. And I have a friend of mine from college. She was a model. She went up to Manhattan,
Mhm.
and she told me that there
Yeah.
were a couple of modeling jobs that the advertising agency brought the daughter of the VP of the advertising agency, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so the connections, it does happen. People know each other, they get a little leg up. I would say, sometimes that's universal. That happens in
Yeah.
corporate America. I know you have a
Real life.
full-time job, don't you?
I do. I do.
So you have a full-time job plus this, so you know that, these kind of things happen. So
That's
that's
right.
that's one that, yeah, I think that I would expect that. I think it's important for people to know, you face that. It was interesting last night when I was telling one of my friends that I was gonna talk to you today. She
Yes.
said, "Well, I don't wanna hear we just got lucky." She wants to hear
Oh, yeah.
the work that goes into
Oh,
it.
it's a lot.
And so tell me a little bit about, so you emailed all these people, you have multiple
Mhm.
agents, which I think in itself could be a full-time job, just managing all those relationships. What about the travel and frequency? You're keeping your children in school, and like you mentioned, they're in sports. So
Yes.
how are you doing this? How are you?
It's that everybody asks me that, and I don't even know how sometimes I do it, but I take one day at a time. I have to be very organized, honestly, and have a calendar that, like, if we audition for something, I have to put it on the calendar and say hold, because if not, things could be, duplicated, triplicated, whatever, because they play travel club soccer, both of them at the highest level for their age group, and also school. And they have to have their grades up, which they do, well, A's and B's. So no complaints. But oh goodness. It's tough. So I save my PTO for those shoot days. And for school, they can only miss, I think it's like 6 days a quarter. And we have missed up to 6 days. Luckily, I haven't had to have the conversation about the seventh day, but I always get the letter. Your son has missed, X number of days. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So, it's worked out where I'm pushing the limits sometimes, with more time off than, in a certain period of time. And every year when school starts, it's always the first week of school. They get a job, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gonna think I'm this worst mom, like. But I try not to have them miss the first day of school. And if it's gonna be something like that, I'll say, hey boys, is this something are you willing to do? What do you want to do?
Right.
But
Well, how
yeah.
long do these auditions take?
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
what do these
So
auditions kind of look like? Do you have to fly or drive to them? Which one is?
before COVID, yes. And so
Mhm.
that I would not have been able to sustain, because taking your son out of school, driving to Tampa, Orlando, whatever, because I didn't do Miami at the time. I didn't do Miami until after COVID. Okay. So
Mm.
the agents that I had pre COVID were Tampa, Orlando, something more, proximity, because you drive to an audition, 3 minutes, you're in front of the director, and they're asking you to do some actions or motions, a scene, like pretend you're under a tree and you see a balloon, or, things like that. Literally 3 minutes.
Are you in the room during this?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
You're in the
That's interesting.
lobby. You're in the lobby. They
Okay.
don't have the
Yeah.
parent go in because they want them to
Mhm.
be themselves.
Right.
So then you leave, you go home. If you get a call back, you have to go back, or you can book the job like that. So that was not sustainable for us, but we did it for about a year. Okay. And now remember,
Mhm.
they were just starting out. So we didn't get as many, as we would potentially possibly get now. COVID happened. That was the best thing that could happen to us because it opened the doors. The Miami agents were like, oh, I don't know. We've never had anybody that far. But I knew I was so committed, and I would do anything in my power if they got that job to make it happen, whether I had to drive all night, sleep in my car. I was going to get there with the kids. But she didn't know that about me
Right.
because I'm just that
Right.
person. Right. But I knew. So I'm like, I promise you, you would be happy. Right. And so over time, she said, okay. And that just expanded with, the folks down south. So that's the only reason we can do it now, is because so now what it looks like, and that's why my background, I was telling you about earlier, I have a big blue screen up, and it's portable. So you can take it up and put it down. We have lighting. I had to learn, different lightings that we pull out, put back every time, some shadow boxes, just the equipment you need to do an audition. So they will send you a script sometimes, actions to do, whether you're, looking at fireworks for Disney in the air,
Mhm.
pretending you're eating, and, like in the Epcot foods, whatever it may be, they give you and then you have to introduce yourself. That's always a part of it. And then you have an action, and then you put it onto a iMovie or, a video. You label it a certain way, and everything has to be exactly the way they ask, or they'll just like put it to the side because you
Right.
didn't follow instructions. I mean, it just sounds so silly to be so, on this stuff, just labeling a file, but that's what you do. So you get a request and you say, okay, I would be available. The agent sends it to the job people, the client, and they say, you know what, I want X, Y, and Z people to audition. So we get it back with instructions. But if you say you're available, you have to be available. Like
Right.
that's what has to go on the calendar, because if you say you're available, they choose you, and you say you're not, that is just like suicide in the industry. I mean, unless somebody
Yeah.
passed
Yeah.
away or something.
Now,
So
are you on a platform like
yes,
the
networks.
casting platform? Is that what it is? Casting networks or something like that?
Castingnetworks.com. Yes.
Okay.
And honestly, anybody, and that's what I did at the beginning. Anybody can be on Casting Networks. It's free for one picture. And before I did anything, I was doing it myself, right? I was the agent. I mean, truly the agent. And there was one for New York City for Delta Airlines. And not knowing anything, this is literally how green I was. I was like, oh my gosh, they want to audition Christopher to audition. We drove to Orlando, took a 6 a.m. flight, went to New York City, did the audition for Delta, enjoyed New York City. We had a blast, and then flew back to Orlando and then drove home. And, we didn't get a call back or get the job, but I wanted to see what it was like, how many people
Right.
go.
It's an adventure.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing too, though. I think if you go into it, and it's kind of the way I feel like I've gone into this podcast, you go into it as everything is an adventure. Even like almost the rejection is an adventure. Like this is new, you learn new technology, you're learning a new industry, you're kind of learning how things work.
There's a lot to it.
You're willing to jump on a plane to have that adventure. And it's amazing to me that I just think that everybody, especially coming out of COVID, are a little timid about going on adventures. And I say,
Yeah.
you live one life. You need to
Right.
go. You need to go. When
Yeah.
given the opportunity, say yes.
I feel that way, but on it for us, it really is about the journey, because we feel, I mean, I know it sounds so cliche-ish, but life is so short, right? But my husband and I, we just want to enjoy the journey. We have never set out to say, you know what, we want the kids to be Brad Pitt or, no, nothing like that. And it's just enjoying the journey. So if we get something great, if not, oh well, I mean, it's been just, disappointing every now and then, but we know to do the audition and forget about it. We
Oh, well,
send it in,
that's
we literally forget about it.
yeah, that's an interesting part. So if you had to have like a ratio, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would say out of 10 auditions when we first started, we got what?
Probably 0. I mean, 0
for like 6 months, a year, the
okay,
first year.
okay, yeah, a time period, maybe 1. I
Right.
mean, even now, I mean, you do so many, and it might be, I don't know, 5% for auditions. Now you can get jobs different ways too, and I can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah, sure.
they're super, super hard. Now we have been successful, but not. It's difficult. The way we've been booked more often was literally doing a job and they want us back, or
Right.
they networking and they know about us. So we did Pet Paradise. It was a 2-day shoot, the entire family, and it
Oh,
was
nice.
and it was through network. I had met somebody that was, a casting agent, director, and he called me directly. He wasn't affiliated with any of the agents, so I didn't have to pay, because every job the agents get 20% and we get the remaining.
I was curious if you were going to share financials. I was going to ask you permission to go there, but
yeah.
you do hear about some of these agents, and I'm sure that Taylor Swift looked back when she first started, she would
Yeah.
have been like, "Oh, I didn't realize I could negotiate them down to 10% or this or that." But when you're first starting and someone
Mhm.
says, "Okay, I could give you $100, but I'm going to take $20." You're like, "Well, that's $80. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
have $100, but now I have $80, so
Right.
sure, I'll give you
Yeah.
$20." That makes
That
sense.
is industry standard. I mean, that's just the way
Right.
it, and we're non-union, we're not SAG, right? Which is the the actors, once you do certain level of work, you have to join the union.
Mhm.
But we're non-union. So we do non-union jobs, and as non-union, you can also do SAG work. And really the main difference is it's regulated. So a child, for example, Alex has worked and Chris, long days in Florida. That would never happen if you were under a SAG contract.
What's a
There,
long day? 10 hours? 12
oh, Alex,
hours?
yeah, I would say 10, yeah, 10 hours. We've done that.
10 hours? Well, these
Mhm.
kids have more energy. It's kind of like
Yeah, it was
they
exciting.
can
I mean,
do
that was
10
for
hours.
Mazda. That was a Mazda commercial. I mean, it was amazing. Like we were having a blast. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, so that's standard. But if you're SAG, it's usually 10%, 10 to 90%. So it depends if it's TV, print, or commercial, but that's the range. And sometimes they'll do the 20% after the rate that they quote us versus taking it from our rate. So you have to be very careful when you're reading, what the job pays.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
So Pet
it's
Paradise, we've got Pet Paradise, we have Mazda, we
yeah.
have Dick's Sporting Goods, we have a cruise line. What was that cruise
Oh, so
line?
MSC
That was
Cruise
fun one. I
Line.
saw that video. That
Uh,
was a fun one.
if we did nothing else ever, that was just the best time ever. So what happened there is we didn't even audition for it. We didn't even know about this job. We're at a soccer game, and one of the agents calls and says, "Hey, could Alex audition for this, and would he be available?" Well, we had another job in Tennessee, and then because it was a cruise line, I was like, "Well, we could maybe leave early from this other job because I knew the guy and I knew he would be so supportive." So what happened is the kid that was originally chosen broke his arm. And so they needed a very
Oh,
quick replacement. And they liked Alex's picture on their website. And they asked us. And I'm like, oh my goodness, a cruise line? I didn't even know about MSC. I never knew. So long story short, he booked the job the next morning. He had to fly a kite for his audition at the soccer field because they wanted it ASAP. By
oh,
8 o'clock the next morning, they told us he had the job. And I'm like, I think this means we go on a cruise, right? So we did. They flew us from Tennessee to Miami. We got on the ship, and it was huge, and went to the Bahamas. And it was only him because it was a sister ship being retired and the new one coming, and so they were doing a 3-minute video for the big opening ceremony of and he was the only person in this in this video commercial, only person.
it looked like a corporate event. Like
It
it
was
looked like
well,
it was like a corporate unveiling of the ship. Is that what was happening
Well, it
there?
was normal people. I mean, it was the cruise people, and anybody in New York that was affiliated would come, because what they did
Oh,
is they
right.
brought the ship last Christmas, and it was parked, so they had to stay on the ship it was 2 different times. So we did the shoot, and then they brought us back for the unveiling. Yes, yes. So, but yeah, it was a lot of the corporate people, and then people from the ship, the passengers and things that wanted to join. But it's huge, huge crowd. It was beautiful. The result was amazing. So, and then we went to Puerto Rico. They flew us back, and that was, I mean, if we would have done nothing else ever, that was just worth it to me. All the effort, and
Well,
it was
I
amazing.
have to ask because we are Florida. Has
Yeah, yeah.
Disney or Universal come calling?
No,
Have you
and we do
landed
a
anything at
large.
Disney, at Universal? I mean, it makes me wonder
Mm,
because, people think, "Oh, well, you're in the vicinity."
yeah,
But of course, COVID has provided a remote world.
yeah, yeah,
So, people are probably doing some virtual auditions, I imagine,
yes,
which kind of opens up some floodgates maybe.
absolutely.
And so, your Florida resident doesn't just have the I drive down to Orlando and walk into Disney casting. That just so I was curious if there was
Oh,
any
Disney, Disney,
advantage
Disney.
there, but
Well, let me
maybe
let
they
me
have their
clarify.
own agents.
So let me just clarify one thing, because this honestly adds to the difficulty of doing this. When you audition for something in Miami, Orlando, or Tampa, they want you to be a local, because a lot of times they don't want to pay you for the drive. and or the lodging. So you have to
Mhm.
be willing to have that expense for your kid or whoever to do the job, right? So, a lot of the dick stuff, they know you're out of town, they will pay for it. Some of the other jobs we've had, you're on your own. Most of them you're on your own. So I use my hotel points with my credit card for those nights. So I
Right,
mean
and are
that,
you guys an S corp? Like, are you writing off
you know what?
the
We will
expenses?
going to be. Yes, we
Okay.
we are now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Finally got smart, and that's a lot of work just documenting all of that. I mean, oh my goodness. So Disney, we really wanted Disney, so badly, and there's so many, crews, and it's so difficult. It's so difficult, and so no, we have not been successful with a Disney. Except Alex did do a. I keep calling him Alex. Christopher does a lot of work too, but it's just the age matters. A sweet spot is 8 to 10 years old with his size.
Mhm.
When you get to be like 14, you're not quite a man, you're not quite a kid. So right now
Right,
it's a
right.
little bit less. So Alex has done probably double than Chris. But Disney, it's so difficult. And I'm almost to the point. I mean, I love them and I wish we could, but it's too much work for me. It's just like, I don't know.
Well,
I
yeah,
burn
yeah.
out with
I
that.
mean, and then some people have their targets, and then sometimes,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, the cruise line just comes, out of
Yeah.
the blue.
Yeah.
So you use your PTO days.
I
COVID
save them.
actually helped you. You're with
Yes.
multiple agents.
Yes.
You're finally going to do, I would have told you to do. Somehow I feel like somebody should have told you to have an S corp if you're using your own money, but
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
sure to,
Yeah.
I'm sure you know that, and you're going to be writing that off on your taxes.
Mhm.
What else? Where do you think you guys are going next? What do you think that next? What usually happens? What happens?
Well,
Does
it's been
anybody, did
so
anybody tell you what happened? Are your agents telling you what's going to
no.
happen?
No,
Oh,
really, no, because they have so many people, right? I mean, they're a money
really?
machine too. I mean, unless, yeah. So it's really up to like what we want, right? How much I want to pursue something. How much, how dedicated are the kids? Like, do they want to be? We would never be like a Brad Pitt, a superstar. But what I'm saying is, do they want to, press that route? Do they want to press the soccer route? Christopher just started high school, right? So he's in heaven right now, being in ninth grade, being, frankly one of the best soccer players on the team, right? He's a club player and a lot of people aren't. Just he's loving life in ninth grade. I mean, he is tasting, starting to drive soon. And so it's really a interesting spot to be in. And again, it's just the journey for us. We've never set out to be, I don't know, going to LA or New York. We just enjoy the journey, earning some money, having fun, all of the teachings. But I will tell you, the kids did a TV pilot last summer, and they were the principals in the show. And we have another one that they just got hired for. Now the one that we just got hired for, we will be filming 8 to 10 days in Alabama in the spring. And they have to shave their head because it's about
Wow.
cancer. Yep. And so that's a big hurdle just in that, right? Because Christopher, he's known for his amazing hair.
Yeah, well, they both have really nice hair. Yeah.
They do, they do. I mean, yeah. And so it's a fork in the road. And then our big decision, if the network likes them so much, because they're not, big names. There's gonna be some Emmy winning actors in this pilot. So they have people like that, and then you have the middle of the road, more known people, and then you have us that haven't done as much acting, right? We've stuck with mainly TV or print and commercial. So we're going to do that pilot and really see from the kids, like if the network says, you know what, I'm going to keep these kids, and so let's renegotiate the season one contract. If that were to happen, we really have a lot to think about, because it would be in LA, and he's already told us, you would be a resident of LA. You have to be for this.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah,
so that's what I was wondering about,
yeah.
because at some point, I don't know if I'll ever be able to
Opportunity. Yeah.
interview Taylor Swift's mom, but at some point you have a child that's almost demanding to make that big move.
Mhm, mhm.
There's also, the American soccer player whose dad
Yeah.
moved to Germany.
Right.
So, you're
Yes.
talking about your son being good at soccer. You
Oh,
typically have to
amazing.
go to Europe.
Yeah.
So if you don't go to LA, you may find yourself in Europe.
Yeah, right? I mean, I don't
and
know.
and so these are the parenting decisions
Yes.
that some people have to make. One of my girlfriends, her son was quit college because he got drafted by the Major League Baseball. It was part of the
Yeah.
draft. And
Right.
he is grounded as well, a
Yeah.
very nice person. And
Mhm.
she said, we took it one season at a time.
Yeah.
And I never thought I would be sitting here
Mhm.
watching the draft and his name being called. Like she
Amazing.
never had
Amazing.
that end goal in mind, but he
Yes.
did. He put in the work and
Yeah.
he did. So he led his parents down that path. And so,
Yeah.
we got to follow up with you. We have to figure
Yeah.
out
It's
what happens
scary,
with this. So we're
honestly.
going to leave this as a cliffhanger. This is part
Yeah.
1
It's one for me
with
too.
Linda Leneve and
Yeah.
Chris
And
and
Al,
Alex Leneve,
there's
and
so
we're going
many
to say
layers.
this is part 1. This is the beginning. We're going to say this is the beginning of what potentially
Yeah.
could be, um, you know, child
Yeah.
actors, models, and then not really so much children anymore as they go
Yeah.
into adulthood.
Adulthood.
So
Sure.
more to hear about that. So I'm gonna kind of wrap this up, and I'm gonna say
Okay.
I want to hear.
Okay.
I want to hear. I guess I'm not going to say your daily life. Let's
Mm.
say,
Mm-mm-mm.
what does your maybe weekly life look like?
Mhm, mhm.
Describe that. Describe that
Ah,
for us. Thinking of a week where there's, you've got an audition in there or something like that.
yes.
What does that look like for you? Just kind of walk us through it as if you're guiding us here.
Right. So today is a perfect example. We have work tomorrow and school back tomorrow after the holiday. We have literally 3 auditions that we are due tomorrow. Right. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we said we'd be available. So we needed to get these done tonight. But they have to be in the right, I don't mean to elongate this, but they have to be in the right mood, too. You can't just, and there's 2 of them, right? So it's really hard to gather everyone, say, oh, let's do this now when they're, whether on their phone, Fortnite, practice, whatever. So I'm gonna have to get my husband to like say, hey, let's get the family together, set up, etc. But also I always have to look at my week and I have to say, okay, there's game here, there's practice there, honey. What days, what are you doing? It's just so much coordination, right? And what kind of projects I have at work because that's the priority. I have to have my paycheck, my livelihood. And I will say that all the modeling and acting stuff is my passion. So I love working where I work and it's wonderful and it's very fulfilling. But my hobby is the modeling and acting. So I just really have to plan ahead, look ahead, communicate with my husband and oh my gosh. And then, my boss, right? If I have to leave early someday, if I'm going to be later someday, it's so much work. It really is. It's just exhausting. And I'm a spaz. You can probably tell by my energy.
Well,
So,
I think ADD people, I would say I
uh-huh.
fall on that spectrum,
Yeah.
that, we get bored easily, so we have to constantly be
Yes. Fill my
challenged, and
time.
and
Yes.
and I'm with you. I have a full-time job in the
Yeah.
technology business, but
Yeah.
I'm doing this podcast because, I'm ADD, and I just
I
can't get
understand.
enough of learning things from other people,
Hmm.
people, and, and just learning the technology to do this podcast was interesting to me, just
Yeah.
as you're constantly learning how to do the blue background, how to get all those recordings, and
Ugh.
now you're a podcast person because you're a
Right. I know. A
podcast
new
guest.
beginning. A new beginning.
I know. We'll probably be starting one of your own. And one of the things you mentioned there that we did not talk about, and I think this is probably what I would say is part of your advice. You mentioned family. Everybody's on board. Sounds like your husband's on board.
Oh yes.
His brothers on the 2 brothers are in this together,
They
which I think
are. That's
also
amazing.
makes that
It helps.
amazing.
It helps a lot.
And now you kind of think of, Hemsworth. Is that their
Oh
names?
yeah, Chris Hemsworth. Uh-huh.
Yeah, those 2 brothers seem like they get along great. At least they appear like they get along great.
Yeah.
Sounds like their family is a pretty close family,
Hmm.
and keeping it fun and
Yeah.
making
My
it
husband has a lot of
their
patience. I will
decision.
just say that because I get overwhelmed naturally with work and sports and, auditions. Like tonight, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's getting late and the kids are going to be fussy probably. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you forever. So,
No,
okay, so
yeah.
if I'm a family
Uh-huh.
and my kids are showing sort of that, hey, nowadays these kids will just take pictures of themselves and
Oh,
and
selfies,
and,
lots of selfies.
and they're thinking to themselves, well, how do mom, dad, will you support me in this?
Yeah.
What would you say to the parents on how to kind of gauge their interest and then sort of walk that? What advice would you give them sort of walking into that journey?
Yeah, I would say, try it out because see how they like it. And so many times I've said, kids, if it's too much, if it's too, if you don't want to do this, please, this is not for me. This is for you. Cause oh no, 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 we're fine. We're fine. I'm like, okay. Cause that's my, temperature check because I don't, it's not for me. Right. I mean, I enjoy it. Yes. And I love that they do it, but they have to want to do it. But it also helps when you do it for a while to understand, not to get disappointed, you do the audition, forget about it, celebrate when you do get something, and then also, talk to somebody who's been there and done that to help because we're all in this together, um, and and another thing, if you don't get a job, it's not because it's you, it's because it's not the right color hair or the parent that they chose had red hair or a certain height. So there's so many factors that go into it. So don't give up. Just do it, show the enjoyment, and one day you'll book something, and then you'll really see what it's kind of nice to get a paycheck. The kids love that, right? And so is it worth it? Is it worth it for you? um but I always I help a lot of people because I know what it's like to not know what you're doing, and I mean I'm still learning every day, right?
Right, right.
um
No, it sounds, I mean, it just sounds really interesting to me. That's why I'm thinking we need to
yeah, I just
do
gotta
a little
sneak it in.
follow-up. You need to
Yeah,
text me
yeah.
if you find that you are about to make a move
Oh
decision.
gosh.
Naturally, we would miss seeing your children around the soccer field and
Mhm.
around the school, but would love to hear, you really should start a diary. Have you
Yeah,
started a
Chloe's
diary?
now I have not. I have not. My pictures are my diary. I take a million, like literally I have
Yeah.
about 150,000 on my phone from like the last 3 years. But I'm always trying to get that one shot for Instagram because we can talk about social media another day because that helps, by the way. Um,
Right, right.
but here's the thing, and I'll leave it at that. But what if one kid is wanted, one kid's not? What if one kid likes it, one kid doesn't want to do it? And then half the family has to go to LA and half the family is here. We have both our parents. I mean, it's just like there's so many things that like keeps me up at night right now. But I've never been in a situation where the what ifs is freaking me out. But my husband says, we'll just take one day at a time. We do the pilot. Let's just see how it goes. And if we have decisions to make there, we'll figure it out then. But it's just like there's to date, they're doing things together, right?
Right,
And
right.
yeah, and so that's been such a blessing as well. And anyway, so we'll see.
Well, you know what we say on Decision Diaries here? We say no regrets, no do-overs.
That's right. That's right.
We don't worry. We just don't worry about the
Yes,
what
yeah,
ifs.
yeah,
I've made some decisions, and if you listen to some of the earlier podcasts, I made some
yeah, I
decisions in
have.
my 20s
Yeah.
to start a business when I had probably no business starting a business. But I would I learned so much during
Much
that, and
fun.
there's so many great stories afterwards that,
Yeah,
again,
exciting.
no regrets, no do-overs. Don't worry. Thank
That's
you
right. That's
so
right.
much for coming on.
Yeah.
Thank everybody for
Thank
listening.
you. Thank you so
If
much.
you could send me a few pictures, I'd like to put it on our Decision Diaries Instagram so everybody can see how gorgeous your children are, and
Oh, thank
particularly
you.
that I loved the video of the cruise because it
Thank
really made his
you.
blue eyes pop with all the blue.
Yeah.
For those people that are listening, hope you have some takeaways. I hope we're all hoping for this group to see them on a sitcom. Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
fabulous for everybody out there? And then if anybody has any other decision ideas or you'd like to be on my podcast, you can go to my website, decisiondiaries.com. Also have an Instagram site. Thank you so much. I'll
Thank
let you go so
you.
you guys can do some more fabulous auditions.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
having
you
me. It's been
so
a pleasure.
much.